Awesome. Thank you very much, everybody. So I'll just jump straight in with it. And what we're talking about here is really the importance of getting your data management right in the first place. So we're all familiar with this sort of client farm field structure, which is on our GPS screens. And it doesn't matter which brand of screen you use, they're all kind of working the same way. So what you've got is this sort of hierarchical way of filing any work you do. So when you, in the simplest form, you pull into the paddock, you want to pull up an A/B line to do a guidance job or something, it's choosing the clients, then within the clients you choose the farm, and the farm you choose a field, and there's the A/B line for that particular field. So most of the systems that you'll come across, you can have an unlimited number of fields in every farm, and an unlimited number of farms in every client, and so you can build up quite an unwieldy looking list after a while. And this presentation is really about keeping that list tidy and getting it working for you. In most farm situations, you generally only really need one client because that sort of represents your farm business as a whole, and contracting works that you can separate out of other people's data from your own data. So the classic sort of management tree view that you got in desktop software would have looked like this. So on the left, we've got SMS from Ag Leader, and on the right, you're looking at FarmWorks. And this is really laid out the same as Windows Explorer or emails in Outlook. And it's that classic sort of Windows desktop way of filing one file in another by having those cascading folders. But as we move on to the online platforms that most people are now getting more familiar with, it starts to sort of change the layouts a little bit, but the principle is still exactly the same. So this is in the Trimble Ag software, so Trimble's online software. Same deal. On the left-hand side, you've got a list of all of your paddocks, but then you've got tabs across the top, but you can filter to choose different farms or different clients. But the principle is still the same, client farm field. If you move into the John Deere software, same principle. Right-hand side, you've got a list of paddocks, and this time you get a little thumbnail for each paddock so you can sort of see the shape of it. And again, on the right-hand side, then on the left-hand side, you've got boxes where you can select, again, the client, the farm, and you can also apply a couple of simple filters at this stage, such as whether it's active in this year's cropping program, whether it's irrigated or non-irrigated, that kind of thing. Agfinity, so Ag Leader software, to their cloud-based products to link with their displays. Same deal. You see the same list of paddocks there, each one with the under the categories of clients and farm. So you're getting the idea. Everybody's sort of singing from the same song sheet with this. So it doesn't really matter which product you're using. You've got the same data structure there. And so why is it important that we do this? So in simple terms, it's really grouping all of the data for the same paddock into the same place. So it prevents you having partial maps if you've got multiple headers. So you've got two headers in the paddock. You want to make sure the data from both of them ends up filed in the same place so that you end up with one big yield map, not two half yield maps. And also it enables you to link your other data. So if you've spent the season, you've done your seeding job, you've done some fertilizer jobs, you've done some spraying jobs, and all of those have got associated coverage maps and, of course, costs and inputs allocated to them. If you've got your management tree set up properly, then each of those jobs and ultimately the harvest job will all end up filed in the same place. So then, depending on which software you're using, it's then a fairly simple task to spit out things like a profit map or gross margins and that kind of thing. So when it goes wrong, you get this kind of thing. So what we've got here is basically the same paddock, but it's got two different names. So the guy on the first header called the paddock Top Paddock South, spelt it out in longhand, as it were. And the guy on the second header abbreviated the South to be just STH. Now we can see that it's supposed to be the same paddock, but the software wasn't smart enough to work that out. And so it's read it in as two separate paddocks. And so on the top, you've got all the data from one header, and on the bottom map, you've got all the data from the other. Now, it's not an insurmountable problem. It's quite easy to then merge these two together in the software, but it's just one of those tasks you don't really need to have to do if you've got your management trees set up properly in the first place. And then going to the other extreme, we can see here that they've got a nice management tree set up with all of their paddock names, but the guy on the header didn't know what the paddock was called or didn't know how to operate it properly. So he just called it paddock 1 and started harvesting. And he's harvested 3 paddocks, all under the name of paddock 1. So what we're seeing there is 3 jobs which say they're canola harvest 2019, but they're all filed under paddock 1. Again, it's not an insurmountable problem. We need to come in here and select each one of those jobs one at a time and move them into the correct paddock. But again, if it's set up properly and the guy in the header is doing the right thing, it's something that happens automatically and just makes life that little bit easier. So what's the process for doing this? First step, I would say, before you make any changes anywhere, is to make a really good backup of all of the data on your existing display. And it doesn't matter what brand of display you've got the same ideas. So in principle, they're all constantly backing themselves up into the cloud. So all of the data is now, whether it's in your operations center, whether it's in the Trimble Ag software, whether it's in your Agfinity software or Trimble's TAP, or Topcon's TAP, sorry, it's all backing itself up. But what is quite hard to do in those platforms is an undo. So if you make a pile of changes and you delete some paddocks and things, it's quite hard to go back. So I'm a great believer in having one USB stick for each of your screens. And when you've got them set up to a point where everything's working properly and you've got all your machine profiles and things in there, put a USB stick in the screen, run a complete system backup, and put that USB stick somewhere safe. Label it and don't use it for other things, so that if the worst happens, you can always restore it. Now, it may be that we just make a bit of a mistake when we're tidying up and we lose a couple guidance lines that we want, or it might be that something catastrophic happens and you lose the screen in its entirety. And then when you're supplied that new screen, if you've got that backup USB, it's dead easy just to put it back exactly as it was before. So the process you go through once you back things up is you can then start deleting the stuff you don't want. So in the desktop software, it's the classic Windows thing where you can right click on a paddock name and choose delete. And that's pretty much the same in Ag Leaders, SMS, or the FarmWorks software from Trimble. With the online software, it's a similar process, just laid out a slightly different way. So you end up with generally a list of paddocks where you can run down the list and put a tick in the box and have a delete button at the top. Or in the case of the software we're looking at here, there's just there's sort of a little dustbin icon that I've circled in red there, which will delete that one paddock. So delete the ones which are just fictitious ones. So where somebody's created a paddock with the wrong name, just for doing a simple job, delete those. Next one is correcting spelling errors and numbering errors and that sort of thing. Now, you might think it doesn't really matter whether you've got capital letters and lowercase letters or whether you've spelled things right or not. Well, it might not matter too much on the header, but when you start printing reports and things, you don't want your maps with the paddock spelled wrong and simple typos and things. So to save you having to clean things up later, again, when you set up your management tree, just get it looking neat and tidy to start with, and you'll be happy with the results on everything you're doing later on. And trying to avoid paddocks with duplicate names. So the example I've got here is this guy's got 2 farms, both of them have got a paddock called Hayshed. Everybody's got a home paddock, a house paddock, a hayshed paddock, a cattle yard paddock. And if you've got multiple farms, odds on you end up with multiples of the same. And that can just add a level of confusion in the paddock, where if you just run down an alphabetical list of paddocks, you pull Hayshed, but it's the Hayshed for the wrong farm. Again, not an insurmountable problem. When the data comes into the software, you can then move it back into the right farm. But if you get it in the right place and the right to start with, it's one less job to have to do. So instead of just calling it Hayshed, call it the farm name. So Woolbrook Hayshed and Winghill Hayshed. Just give them a bit more of a logical name if you can. So once you've got your management tree set up right in your software, the deal is then to export it to all of your GPS displays and make sure you get to all of them so that they're all set up exactly the same. So it doesn't matter whether it's the display in the seeding tractor, say you want your coverage map from your seeding, or the display in your header, you want them all to have that same client farm field list so that any jobs you do will come into your software and be filed in the same place. So this is a view from the old FarmWorks software, the desktop software, and this has got a pretty exhaustive list of screens that you can export it to. And where the FarmWorks comes into its own is if you've got some old displays kicking around, it can write to all the really early AGCO screens and the earliest of the case screens and things as well. So it still has its place, but of course these days people are moving a lot more onto the online platforms. So this is from John Deere's Operations Center. You can either beam it straight to your shiny new connected display, or you've got an option to press the setup file creator, which will create a file on a USB for putting it into an older display like a Beamstar 2 or something. So another one, so this is Topcon's TAP software. So again, when you've got the list in there, you've got an option, green button in the top right does export to ISO XML. So ISO XML is a fairly standard sort of a file. So that'll put it onto a USB so that you can load it into a non-connected display, or again, you can wirelessly, up in the very top right-hand corner, you probably can't see it on the screen, but there's a little button there that says send to, and if you hit that send to, you can choose any of your connected Topcon displays, and again, that'll beam it wirelessly straight to them. Agfinity, which is AgLeader's online platform, same deal. You can hit the export button and you can beam it straight to your screens wirelessly if you've got connected displays. And finally, my final example here is SMS, which is AgLeader's desktop software. Again, this has got a really exhaustive list of displays that it supports. So all of the different John Deere platforms, you can see there everything from your original brown box Greenstar system right through the Generation 4 displays, and sort of everything in between. But it's exactly the same deal. You hit on the device setup button, put a USB stick in and write it to it. And then really the final step in the process, of course, is once you've done all of this, is making sure that the person in the header or the tractor knows how to operate the screen, because there's no point in having all of the paddocks listed on there if they're not familiar with how to select that paddock and start operating it. So maybe have some little cue cards if you've got operators that aren't quite as familiar with the technology, and most of the manufacturers will let you print a little sort of quick start guide for how to open a paddock and select a job and that sort of thing. If in doubt, that's where your local PA specialist or your local dealer comes in to give you a hand with this sort of thing. So that's a real quick run through on it. I didn't want to really go into the how to do it so much as the importance of why you should do it, but I'm happy to take any questions, but that's the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Martin. Has anyone got any questions for Martin before he jumps off? Everyone's setting up their management tree, collecting data. Absolutely right. Bullshit. Martin, I think we're right on this. Is there anything? You get a chocky frog. No, I want a chocky frog. Thanks, Martin. We appreciate that, mate. Martin is available to contact if anyone does want to get in contact with him. He consults in this sort of stuff, and he knows more than I've ever seen someone know about all different screens, which is sort of hard to do when it comes to the end of things.